It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control the discussion today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, it is time for Herd Mentality. We've got some great questions to dive into today. Let's get started. The first one comes from Michael. Michael says, what do you think is Josh Allen's most underappreciated trait? We all know his arm strength, running ability, and competitiveness, but what's not talked about? I'll say field vision late in a play. Josh has an ability to find open targets post-script of routes and make it look routine. I'm interested in your take. I like this question, Michael. To me, the most underappreciated trait that Josh Allen offers is his ball handling. I think he does a great job handling the football, whether it's play fakes, whether it's RPO transitions, his ability to hold the football and his sleight of hand and how he executes fakes, how he hides the football, it's all really, really good. I mean, I've seen him pump fake and use his other hand to kind of make sure that the ball stays attached to his right hand just to make sure that he doesn't lose control of it. I mean, he is very good, whether it's pump fakes, sleight of hand, executing play fakes. His attention to detail, the way he sells things is simply outstanding. And so I would say the most underappreciated trait of Josh Allen's is the ball handling. The next one here comes from Lauren. Lauren says, my question is about Gabe Davis. I know you're not particularly high on him, but it has always seemed pretty clear that the Bills organization loves him, as you've pointed out a number of times on the show. I've heard beat reporters like Sal Capaccio talk about on his own podcast that he really thinks the Bills are going to be extending Gabe Davis's contract. I always thought so too, but I feel like the Ed Oliver extension and even more importantly, the additions of Kincaid, Hardy, and Sherfield this offseason have diminished the chances of that happening. I'm beginning to think that if he doesn't get an extension before the season, that's a sign the Bills will be letting him walk and probably just draft another receiver in the second or third round in next year's draft class. What are your thoughts? Do you think the Bills will still extend him after letting him play through the season? I think I'm operating with the expectation that the Bills are going to find a way to bring back Gabe Davis. Whether I agree with that or not is one thing, but I think they're going to. I just feel like the messaging, as Lauren pointed out, is too strong. I feel like they love this guy so much and that they're going to want him to be part of this beyond this year. And I think there's a chance it happens before the season, maybe something along the lines of a timeline like we saw with Dawson Knox. But whether it's before or after, I think they're going to find a way to get it done. Now, I would have some questions about that because is he going to be your third option in the passing game, your fourth option in the passing game? And with what you're already paying Diggs and what you're already paying Dawson Knox in the first round commitment that you made to Dalton Kincaid, can you really spend premium dollars on another option? I would question that allocation of resources and the opportunity cost that comes with it. Plus, if I'm going to commit the money that it's going to take to keep Gabe Davis, I would want to commit that money to a player that has a more well-rounded skill set. I like Gabe Davis as a fourth option in a passing game, but not as a second or third. And, the Bills gave him 100 targets last year. I think that should come down a bit this year, if nothing else, because of the arrival of some additional receivers, and of course, Dalton Kincaid. But if this is the guy that they want to funnel 100 targets to as wide receiver 2, and they're really comfortable with him, I can see this happening. And look, I mean, Devontae Parker just got $11 million a season from the Miami Dolphins. I think Gabe Davis is going to command more than that. I think he's probably going to be between 13, 14, $15 million a season. And I just don't think that makes sense to commit that money to Gabe Davis. I do fear that the Bills are going to. And so right now, it's my expectation that the Bills are going to keep Gabe Davis and sign him to an extension. And it just feels like they love everything about the guy, how he's wired, how he works, all that type of stuff. So we'll see. I mean, I know they said similar things about Levi Wallace. They said similar things about Tremaine Edmonds, and those guys weren't around. But at some point, you have to start asking yourself, how do we most responsibly allocate the resources, right? It's a limited resource situation. You can't apply all the money to everybody. And does it make sense to pay Gabe Davis considering what you're paying Knox, what you're paying Diggs, and of course the commitment that you made with Dalton Kincaid as a first-round pick? The next one here comes from Dan. Dan has a fun question. He says, if you could be a fly on the wall in a Buffalo Bills meeting room, what would it be and when? And I'll tell you what, I'd love so many different opportunities, whether it was in the offensive, team meetings or defensive teams or any of the position groups. All of that sounds really, really exciting. But if I can only pick one, I think I would pick something front office related, whether it was a free agency meeting or a draft prep meeting, something like that. That's where I would just love to be in there and hear those conversations and see how the team sorts through information to figure out what they're going to prioritize with the moves that they're going to make. Now, probably the draft meeting would be the one that would intrigue me the most, like that last draft meeting where they finalize the board and really kind of talk about their plan and all that. That would really intrigue me. I'd love to be in there for draft day. I think if you gave me like an ultimate bucket list type thing, I would want to be in the Buffalo Bills war room for an NFL draft. That would just, oh man, that would be so cool. That would be what I would want to do. So as cool as it might be to sit in with whoever, Joe Brady and Ken Dorsey, and hear them game plan with Josh Allen, like that would be so cool, or Eric Washington in the D-line, I'd love it. Get me in on those front office meetings, and I'd love to see how that all comes together, because that interests me so much. All right, we got a bunch more to get to, but first I need to tell you about FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 that you can bet on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's simply no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, the next one today comes from James. James says, as you have stated many times, the Bills have flipped the script where good drafted players flew out of here fast. We had to overpay for talent to come, and we are in a state now where players want to be here and are willing to take less money. How much of that is 17? What are your top 5 other key milestones that got us here? Might be interesting to contrast the Brady effect and the current state of the Patriots. Yeah, I think that the Patriot way looks a whole lot different when you don't have Tom Brady. All of a sudden, you're paying stupid money to like Jawan Bentley and Devontae Parker on extensions just to keep them. Doesn't work without Tom Brady. It never has. Not with any of these Belichick disciples that they keep plucking and keep getting opportunities across the NFL. It doesn't work. You need Tom Brady for the Patriot way to work. Now, I think that Bill Belichick and the Patriot way presents a high floor of what you're going to accomplish as a football team. I don't think you're ever going to be completely terrible, but you're probably a 7, 8, 9 win team on a yearly basis. And folks, we know what that's like. That's not a place you want to be. But anyways, to answer the actual question here from James about milestones that kind of got the Bills to the point where they are right now, the first thing I would say that I don't think we talk enough about is winning in 2017. Sean McDermott coming into Buffalo and in year one going to the playoffs, absolutely critical. And if you remember, going into that season, most people were saying that the Bills were tanking. Well, they tanked their way to the playoffs. And setting that foundation was absolutely critical. And, there's been a lot of information that's come out about the Bills and their approach to the 2017 offseason, and even Sean McDermott saying, no, I don't want to draft a quarterback. I want to win this year. And when you draft that young quarterback, you're pretty much saying to your team, like, look, this is going to be a little bumpy, but stick with me. No, I think Sean McDermott earned the trust of the locker room, earned the good graces of ownership and fans by going out and finding a way to get to the playoffs in 2017. It's absolutely critical to everything that's happened since. And then from there, I think the messaging that we got from players very quickly about Sean McDermott and how they prepare and how he prepares them and how he cares about them and the communication piece. I remember when the Bills went into Atlanta, kind of had a fast start in 2017, and they knocked off the defending NFC champions on the road. Pretty dramatic type game. And you saw Sean McDermott and the way he interacted with the team afterwards, and the credit that the players, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, gave to Sean McDermott in terms of how he prepared them for the moments, and they felt like they were so ready for anything that could come their way. And I think all of that, that's where the spark gets lit, right? And you start to gain a little bit of buzz as an organization. And, what's Sean McDermott about? Oh, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde go there, and they wind up having this big ascension a few years into their career and become premier players, and they give all this credit to Sean McDermott. I think a lot of that's so important. So winning in 2017 and how that messaging from the players kind of leaked out into the rest of the league, and how, whether it's players or other organizations or fans, started to view the Bills differently. Then I think you have to give a lot of credit to the facility upgrades. Everything that you hear is that the Bills just have first-class facilities, and whether it's equipment, different staff available to the players, it's all critical, right? These are professional athletes. What they do is based on their body, and they have to take care of their bodies in certain ways to be able to perform at their optimum level. And the Bills providing that opportunity with what they house in Buffalo allows players to go out and be the best version of themselves. And so I think that's a big deal as well. The money that the Pagulas have put into the facility upgrades for the players is huge. It tells the players that, hey, we care about you. We want to give you the best opportunity for you to be the best player that you can. And that goes a long way in retaining players and attracting players. I also think it's more messaging that you also get from McDermott and Bean together in terms of how players talk about the way that they trust them. Listen to Ed Oliver and the way that he talked about the contract negotiations and how there was some stuff put out before the season. They weren't on the same page. Bean told Ed Oliver, said, look, we're going to put this on hold for now, but after the draft, we're going to revisit it. And Oliver said, I trusted him. And after the draft, we revisited it. And now all of a sudden that Oliver's locked up long-term. And I think stuff like that happens a lot with the Bills. And even Stephon Diggs with his contract, it's Jordan Poyer in his contract, even at times where it gets a little dicey, they're able to get on the same page. And I think that goes a long way. It goes a big time way in the Bills and their ability to attract players. And then of course, Josh Allen, right. That's the other piece of this. And look, Josh Allen isn't everything. He's a lot of it, probably the majority, but you can't overlook what happened in 2017 and how that set the stage for everything thereafter. So those are the things that I would point to as the milestones along the way that got us to this point. Another thing that I want to bring up here is the transition coming out of the Houston playoff loss, right? In 2019, Bills were up by 18 at halftime. Josh Allen and the offense kind of unravels late in the game. It gets chaotic. And the way that the team responded from that is absolutely critical. Because what happened the next season? It was 2020. That was Josh Allen's big breakout year. They said, you know what, Josh? We saw how vulnerable you were. We saw that you unraveled, and not just against Houston. There was multiple times throughout that season where things got a little dicey. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to lean further into you. We're going to go spread. We're going to go 4 wide receivers, and we're going to throw the football like crazy. And this is going to be an offense built around you and the best parts of your game. And the Bills very quickly could have saw that unraveling. It's year 2 and said, you know what? We got to figure out a way to tame this player, and leaned into this run-heavy approach and, sprinkle in Josh Allen. No, they went full Josh Allen, and they deserve a lot of credit for leaning into that, despite some of his unraveling leading to some lowlights back in that 2019 season. All right, there's a lot. Went through a lot there, but hopefully you guys could kind of piece together what I'm saying and understand how that leads the Bills to where they are right now. Kevin asks, what do you think will be the biggest story, positive or negative, when training camp opens? It's Stefon Diggs. It's Stefon Diggs, and when he meets with the media for the first time, it's going to be huge. That is what I'm paying attention to. There's a ton of other storylines that I'm interested in, roster battles, whether it's for starting gigs, whether it's for making the team, the evolution of the offense, the evolution of the defense, Dalton Kincaid. There is so much, but the biggest story is Stefon Diggs. And until we hear from Stefon Diggs, we can't put all that stuff that happened in minicamp aside. And how Stefon Diggs responds, what he says, is absolutely critical in those narratives dying or them coming back and us continuing to be concerned about it. So to me, it's Stefon Diggs, that first press conference, and how he responds to everything. That's what I'm going to be pretty much worried about until it happens, and then we'll go from there. Cam says, with Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets, could you talk about a couple of other top quarterbacks when they went to new teams and how they performed? Maybe we will be less worried, maybe more. So I did a quick mental inventory of big quarterbacks transitioning to new teams, and I think with anything in the NFL, you have a mixed bag of results. Last year, you had 2 big-name quarterbacks switch teams, and Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson, and neither one of those went particularly well. Now, I think both situations are quite optimistic about how things can improve this year, but their first season was a disaster. You look at Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning went from the Colts to Denver. He was in Denver for 4 seasons. They went to 2 Super Bowls. They won 1. And Denver's record with Peyton Manning as a starting quarterback across 4 seasons was 45-12. That went pretty well. You had Brett Favre. Brett Favre went to the Jets, right? We've saw this happen before, and he was 39 years old. The Jets went 9-7. He lasted 1 season. Did not go to the playoffs. Joe Montana went to the Chiefs. They were 8-3 and 9-5 in his 2 seasons with Kansas City. And then Tom Brady went to the Buccaneers. Remember that, right? 3 seasons, 32-18, 3 playoff appearances, 2 division titles, and of course, a Super Bowl championship. So those are the ones that came to mind when considering this, but you have a mixed bag of results. And what's really unique about Aaron Rodgers that's different than probably all of these except for, I don't know it's that different. I mean, Manning, Favre, Montana, Brady, they were all pretty old. But, Aaron Rodgers turns 40 this year. So the only one that was that old, I think, was Tom Brady and Brett Favre. So we'll see. I mean, it's all unique. It's all unique people, unique circumstances. Aaron Rodgers is a big upgrade for the Jets at quarterback. They had this Zach Wilson, Mike White, Joe Flacco trio, and Aaron Rodgers is way, way better than all of them. He's a huge upgrade at the most important position, and we know that defense is already really good. So, I think that the Jets are going to be competitive. I think they're going to win 9 or 10 games. I don't sit there and say that they're the favorites to win the East. I don't know that they're a lock to make the playoffs, but they're going to be a lot better. And we can't understate the upgrade that Aaron Rodgers is for that football team at such an important position. Tony says, while listening to you compare the Bills, Chiefs, and Bengals, I thought of a question. Is there a player-for-player trade between the Bills and Chiefs that both teams would consider a win-win? Obviously, neither team would trade their quarterback. Excluding those players and all salary cap issues, what trade would both teams be happy with? Same regarding the Bills and Bengals. Fun question here. For the Chiefs, I looked at a position where they have a surplus and where I think they have a concern to see where there could be some logical opportunities. And I think the Chiefs are just completely loaded with linebackers. I mean, Nick Bolton, Willie Gay, Leo Chenal, Drew Tranquil. That's an absolute abundance of players. And I think the one that would be the most expendable would be Drew Tranquil, who would be a wonderful fit for the Bills at Mike linebacker. Where I think the Chiefs have issues is at defensive tackle. And, could the Bills send Tim Settle to the Chiefs for Drew Tranquil? I think that's a reasonable idea. Again, not predicting this, right? I'm just answering the question. I don't think this will happen at all. But the surplus for both teams are at positions of concern for the other team. So I think that would make sense. And for the Bills and Bengals, I look at the Bengals and I feel like their biggest questions are running back depth, with Joe Mixon kind of shaky last year and then just a bunch of unproven players after him. Would they want another vet? I know Samaje Perine was an important player for them with Joe Mixon. He's now with Denver. So I look at the Bills and ask, well, would Nyheim Hines or Latavius Murray be players that could be of interest to the Bengals at a position where, they have some questions? I think the Bengals also have questions with their defensive tackle depth. So I would also bring up Tim Settle / Jordan Phillips through that same lens that I did Kansas City. And then for the Bengals, where I feel like they have perhaps a surplus or even an opportunity, it's with their right tackle. Jonah Williams is kicking over from left tackle to right tackle. We'll see. They also have Lyle Collins. Now, Lyle Collins tore his ACL very late in the season. But if you wanted to redshirt him or something, or potentially bring him back later in the year and then have him for 2024, I don't know. I think that could be a reasonable lens to look at things through. But I'm obviously not predicting any of this to happen. But through the lens of that question, some fun topics to dive into, and that's where my mind went. All right, folks, we got some more to get into right after a very, very quick break. The next one here comes from Derek. Derek says, now that you've analyzed the Bills, Chiefs, and Bengals, I'm curious to hear what you think about the potential from each of these teams. Who has the highest upside and room to grow from the grades you gave out last week? Well, I think all three should be great teams. I think all three will win their division. I think that you're looking at the top three seeds in the AFC, another competitive race to the number one seed, which will be critical once again. I have high expectations for all three teams, all of them capable of winning 12 plus games, no question. Now, Kansas City has plenty of room to improve on defense. A lot of young players that obviously now have gained some experience, but I still think that's where the questions lie for the Chiefs and how those young players to continue to evolve, how they adjust with a lot of new players rushing off the edge, how their young DBs continue to develop. I think that's all going to be really critical for them, in addition to the development of their young wide receivers. Juju Smith-Schuster is no longer there, and so they're going to lean a whole lot more on Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore, and Rashee Rice, who they drafted in like the third round this year. I think those players and their assimilation to the offense and how Patrick Mahomes gets them going is going to be really important. Also, they have two new starters at offensive tackle, Donovan Smith, who I'm pretty low on at left tackle, and Jawan Taylor, who I don't love that much as a right tackle. And so how those guys step in and handle their duties is going to be important. I think that's where the margins are for Kansas City. It's the defense in general, in particular, I guess the edge rushers and how the DBs come together, but then wide receivers developing and those offensive tackles settling in. For Cincinnati, I come away more concerned about the defense. I don't think they have the depth they did last year. Two new safeties, Chidobe Awuzie coming back from injury. What's he going to look like at corner? Can Cam Taylor-Britt take a step opposite of him? Do they have enough depth on the interior of their defensive line? Those are the questions that I have for the Bengals, but I think their offense should be great. Now, the question with Cincinnati again this year is going to be, how can they lean on their running game? And last year it wasn't very good. I know excuse me, against the Bills. It was great in the playoff game, but they really didn't have the best version of Joe Mixon. Their run schemes were not great. They didn't have any consistency with running the football. Is that going to catch up with them this year? That's kind of my question for them. Obviously, they're going to throw the football extremely well, but the offense will be most effective when they can be two-dimensional. And last year they weren't two-dimensional enough. The next one here comes from Ben. Ben says, can you mention something about how coverages would or should change with a change in middle linebacker? Well, first of all, yes, they have to change because Tremaine Edmunds is such a unique skill set. He allows you to play defense a little bit differently, and the Bills don't have Tremaine Edmunds anymore. And so you do have to make an adjustment. And I think the very obvious adjustment is that you're going to go from more middle of the field open coverages to primarily being middle of the field closed coverages. And what I mean by that is middle of the field closed coverages is more cover 1, cover 3, where you have a safety in the middle of the field that makes it closed. Whereas when you had Tremaine Edmunds, you would have Tremaine Edmunds as your deep middle defender, and you could play more two high safety shells and trust Tremaine Edmunds to get coverage depth. And so I think that's the big transition, is more middle of the field closed coverages, cover 1, cover 3. You're going to see more of that for the Bills defense in 2023. Next one here comes from Nicholas. Nicholas has a question and he has a statement. His question is, Joe Marino is the offensive coordinator. The players on the field are Hines, Cook, Kincaid, Knox, and Diggs. Everyone can play out of the slot, and I believe Cook could be in for a big year rushing. So what's the formation in play? Got to be some sort of play action, right? Well, I'll tell you what, with that personnel, I mean, there's plenty of options. Where I get interested is in aligning these players is in a 3-by-1 set where Diggs is ISO'd on one side, and then your bunch on the other is Kincaid, Knox, and Cook. You have Nyheim Hines in the backfield, and I think you can run a tunnel screen to James Cook, which intrigues me. You can lift the coverage and have a bunch of clear out routes to set up Nyheim Hines out of the backfield. You have Diggs ISO'd up on one side of the formation with a lot to pay attention to on the other. Do you have a good look there for Stephon Diggs to win on a glance route or a sail route, something like that? So I think you just have endless opportunities. You can run outside, right, with those big bodies bunched up, and then speed to the perimeter and Nyheim Hines. I mean, there's just a lot that you can do. And I think that's just generally the excitement that I have about this Bills personnel, is that they can do so much. They can stress defenses in so many different ways. And really, I mean, Ken Dorsey should be just beyond excited for how he can incorporate all these versatile pieces and attack defenses and just put a lot of stress on them. As for your statement, is the statement here from Nicholas is, I don't think there's a world we live in where a player like Ryan Bates keeps the second-round pick O'Cyrus Torrence out of the starting lineup. Thoughts? I'm not so sure. We'll see how it all plays out. But right now I feel like Ryan Bates is going to be the guy. And I get concerned about O'Cyrus Torrence this year making an impact because he's not versatile. He doesn't really offer the appeal to play multiple spots. He's a starting right guard, or he's a bench, he's a one whole player, and that's very concerning. And I'm not writing off O'Cyrus Torrence or anything like that, but I just feel like the momentum is just not there right now for Torrence, and a lot can change, right? We're going to get full contact padded practices very soon. We're going to have preseason games. All of that's going to be really important. But right now I feel like it's Ryan Bates' job. And if I had to guess, if there was a player that had the biggest threat to him, it might be David Edwards. So I'm going to be paying close attention to this. Obviously, I'm not trying to, toss a wet blanket on the O'Cyrus Torrence hype or anything like that. I just kind of feel like it's going to be Ryan Bates. And, obviously a lot can change, but that's kind of my feel on the pulse right now. I could be wrong. Not predicting it, but I feel like it's going to be Ryan Bates. All right, folks, that's it for today on the podcast. Very excited to have a tight end conversation with you tomorrow. We've talked a lot about tight end since the Bills drafted Dalton Kincaid, and even before they drafted Dalton Kincaid. And I really want to get honest with you tomorrow on the podcast on how I see things playing out. I have a lot of data and information that I want to share, so don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.